Shalom, and welcome back to B'nai Noach Academy, Thoughts on the Torah. Please remember to hit the like button, to subscribe, and most importantly, to share this wisdom and inspiration with friends and family. As Jews world over celebrate the very happy festival of Purim, on which we mark the anniversary of the defeat of Haman and his cronies, those who wanted to annihilate the Jewish people at the time. And it's a reminder of the constant, reoccurrence of this Hamanism, if I may, the people who desire to do away with God's people. There is so many lessons to be learned, so much to be garnished from this story, and especially from the way the story was written up as one of the books in the Bible, namely the book of Esther. But one interesting fact I want to point out is that when you look at the title of the book of Esther, immediately a question pops up to mind. Was it indeed only Esther who played a key role in this whole saga? Was it only Esther who was facing the threat of annihilation? In fact, if you think about it, if you follow the story, if anybody was perhaps safe from the decree, it was Esther, because for a very long time, no one knew who she was. No one really knew her true identity. And she was protected, obviously, being the queen, by the palace guards. Nobody would have ever gotten to her, let alone that they didn't know that she was Jewish. It was the rest of the Jewish people that faced annihilation. So why then is it called the scroll of Esther? It should be the scroll of the Jews or the scroll of the miracle or what have you. Another question is, if you go through all the 10 chapters of the book of Esther, you'll find something unique, which is rare and literally exceptional when it comes to a book in the Bible. Not once even, is God's name mentioned in this scroll. Yet it is in this book. Yet it is a book of the Bible, of the Tanakh. And the question is, what is this all about? Well, the truth is there's one answer to these two questions, and that is her true name was not Esther. She's known by that name. That's what she goes by. That is the name that she assumed because of the miracle. But indeed, her original name was Hadassah. That was her name. She became called Esther, and she's known as Esther in relation to this miracle. You see, because the word Esther comes from the Hebrew word hastir, which means to conceal. God concealed himself, both in the phase of the decree, when there was this terrible decree against the Jews. It was a terrible concealment, but even more so in bringing about the miracle. And this is actually why his name is not mentioned once in this book, because the way God made the miracle come about, the way it played itself out, was in a means of concealment. Now, here's the question. If that's the case, is this a great miracle or not? Is this less than or more than? In other words, we have the very famous biblical miracles. The first one that always pops into mind, splitting of the sea. The whole world knew about it. The whole world trembled. And it was just an amazing, amazing thing. You have the giving of the Torah, the revelation of Mount Sinai. You have the Exodus of Egypt. And throughout the Tanakh, you have amazing miracles, which were obvious and clear that it was God's hand that did it. Everybody can see it vividly and openly that this was God. Here was a miracle that if you really look at it, it just seems to be a bunch of, quote, coincidences, a bunch of dots which happen to connect. And once they connect in a certain sequence, wow, everything seems to work out. Everything plays out well. Well, a little Kabbalistic insight, a little Hasidic insight, this type of miracle is indeed greater than any other miracle. In other words, those miracles I mentioned before, the splitting of the sea, leaving Egypt, the Exodus from Egypt, the revelation of Mount Sinai, all those are phenomenal. All those are fantastic. And all those tell the people who witness it, experience it, or talk about it in later generations that indeed God is the one who runs the world. God is the one who's in charge. And he shows it by disrupting nature, by stopping those gears of nature for that moment and showing everybody who's boss. That's fantastic. That's great. But you just heard something that also makes it somewhat deficient. What is the deficiency? You see, in order for God to do that, in order for the people to recognize God, in order for them to realize that he's in control, what happens? Nature needs to be altered. Nature needs to be disrupted. Nature needs to be stopped in its tracks. Who created nature? Who made nature? God himself. And think about it. Not only, so to speak, God has no choice but to stop and disrupt nature, but on a certain level, the quote pragmatist, the pragmatic mind can argue the following and say, okay, I see God is ultimately in charge. He's like the CEO up there in, the high penthouse, so to speak, of the corporation. But down here on the bottom floor here, here in the warehouse, here where we take care of maintenance, so to speak, in the little nitty gritty, you want to tell me God's directly involved? You want to tell me God really moves every single peg, every single gear of nature is happening by his divine providence? Maybe not. Because look, the fact is, when he wants to show himself, the fact is, when he wants to make it clear to us that he's ultimately in charge, he has to disrupt nature. Here, the story of Esther, the story of Purim, is a story in which God shows us that every single detail, every single thing that happens within nature, whether it's in the past, in the present, in the future, is all being controlled and orchestrated by God. It's just that most of the time we don't see it, we're not aware of it. So to us, it seems like nature. But here is where the Hasidic teachings and the Kabbalah explain that this miracle is the ultimate miracle, because this is the miracle where God shows us that within nature, he is fully and absolutely in control, and he is the one who calls the shots in each and every step of the way. When you think about it, I think you'll truly appreciate it, and perhaps find even in your life those seeming coincidental things that happen, but really you'll figure out, and you can, sometimes God gives us that privilege of looking back, of having that awareness and being able to connect the dots and go, wow, God was there with me all along, even though I didn't see it. No, the sea didn't split. The stars didn't fall out of the heavens, but God was there. When it's so simple, it's actually so great.